Welcome to the Story Castle. Here in the Story Castle, every tale has the power to inspire, heal, and transport you to places where dreams are born and magic is real. Tonight's story is one of resilience, courage, and self-discovery, a tale that reminds us of the power within all of us to overcome life's greatest challenges. So find a quiet place, let your imagination take flight, and allow us to guide you into a story the power of belief. Elara stood at the heart of the forest, her breath catching in her throat. The air around her was unlike anything she had ever felt. Heavy, yet strangely light, as though it carried the weight of countless untold stories while still lifting her spirit. A golden light suffused the area, soft and glowing, as if the forest itself was alive and breathing. The trees shimmered with an otherworldly hue, their leaves glinting like they were made of spun gold. The silence wasn't empty. It was profound, humming with an energy that seemed to cradle her very soul. And then she saw it. Emerging from the radiant light, the celestial phoenix appeared, its presence so awe-inspiring that Elara felt her knees weaken beneath her. The phoenix was not merely a bird. It was a vision of transcendent beauty, a creature that seemed to embody the essence of hope itself. Its feathers glowed with an iridescent brilliance, shifting through colors, fiery gold, serene blue, vibrant emerald, each hue flowing into the next like a living aurora. Its eyes, deep and ancient, seemed to hold the wisdom of the universe, as though it had witnessed countless lifetimes and carried the stories of all who had come before. Tears welled up in Elara's eyes, and she fell to her knees. The weight of her journey, the struggles she had endured, and the hope that had carried her this far all came rushing to the surface. She clutched the feather tightly in her trembling hands and held it up, offering it back to the magnificent being before her. Her voice quivered as she whispered, "I don't know why this came to me, but it kept me going. It saved me when I felt like I couldn't go on. Please, take it. I think it belongs to you." The phoenix tilted its head, gazing at Elara with a look that pierced through her very being. Its eyes seemed to speak, though no words were uttered. In that gaze, Elara felt a profound connection, as if the phoenix could see not just her journey, but the deepest corners of her heart, her fears, her doubts, and the strength she hadn't realized she possessed. It wasn't a look of pity or even pride. It was a reflection of understanding, a silent acknowledgement of all that she had overcome. And then, to her surprise, the phoenix did not take the feather. Instead, it let out a soft, melodic cry, a sound that resonated through the forest like the purest note of a symphony. The cry wasn't mournful or triumphant. It was simply beautiful, a sound that seemed to wrap around Elara and fill her with a warmth she couldn't describe. It was then that she understood. The phoenix wasn't here to take the feather from her, or to grant her a wish. It wasn't here to fix her problems or pave the way for her future. No. The phoenix was here to reveal the truth that had been waiting for her to see. The feather had never been the source of its magic. The power, the strength, the hope that had carried her through every obstacle. It had been inside her all along. The feather was merely a reminder, a symbol to help her uncover what had always been within her. Elara felt a wave of emotions crash over her. Relief, gratitude, awe. It was as if a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. She clutched the feather to her chest, its soft glow warming her fingers, and whispered, "It wasn't the feather. It was me." The phoenix spread its magnificent wings, their radiant glow illuminating the forest in a final burst of light. As it rose into the air, it didn't vanish so much as it became one with the light itself, dissolving into the golden radiance that surrounded her. For a moment, Elara simply sat there, bathed in that warm, ethereal glow, feeling both humbled and empowered. When the light finally faded, she was alone. But for the first time, the solitude didn't frighten her. The forest no longer felt overwhelming or unfamiliar. Every shadow, every tree, every whisper of the wind felt like it was part of her journey, a journey she had the strength to complete. She rose to her feet, clutching the feather close to her heart. As she began the long walk back to her village, her steps were lighter, her heart steadier. The world hadn't changed, but she had, and that made all the difference. The feather, she realized, would always be with her, not because of its glow or its connection to the phoenix, but because it was a symbol of what she now knew to be true. Hope isn't something you find. It's something you create. No matter how dark the path ahead might seem, the light within is always enough to guide the way. Long ago, in a forgotten village nestled at the edge of an ancient forest, there lived a girl named Elara. Her world was small, her days filled with the simple routines of village life, yet her heart carried dreams far greater than the horizon she could see. Life in the village was not easy. Her family struggled against harsh winters and barren fields, doing their best to make ends meet. Yet, despite the hardships, Elara was different. Where others saw limits, she saw possibilities. She dreamed not just of surviving, but of living, of seeing mountains that touched the clouds, rivers that sparkled like threads of silver, and a world where hope was not something fragile to hold on to, but something boundless, like the air she breathed. Elara's grandmother, a weaver of tales whose voice seemed to carry the wisdom of countless lifetimes, was her anchor during these tough times. By the warmth of the fire, with shadows dancing on the walls, she would tell stories of wonder and magic. But there was one story that Elara never grew tired of hearing, the story of the enchanted feather. The celestial phoenix, her grandmother would begin, her voice soft yet commanding, is not like any bird you have ever seen. It exists beyond the veil of this world, in a place only the heart can reach. The phoenix doesn't come to grant your wishes, child. No, its feather is something far greater. It carries a power that reminds you of the strength already within you, the strength to change your path, to find your light even in the darkest night. Elara would sit by her grandmother's side, her wide eyes reflecting the firelight, as she listened to every word with a reverence that only a child could give. The stories painted pictures in her mind, images of a bird whose feathers shimmered with the colors of dawn, glowing with a warmth that could soothe even the deepest sorrow. These tales were not just stories to Elara, they were promises of something greater, something beyond the confines of her small, struggling village. They became her sanctuary, a place she could retreat to when the weight of the world became too much to bear. But life has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. One night, a storm unlike anything the village had ever seen swept through the land. The sky, once filled with stars, turned an angry shade of black, and the winds roared like wild beasts, tearing apart homes and uprooting trees with ruthless force. Rain lashed against the earth, drowning out even the cries of the villagers. Elara and her family huddled together, praying for the storm to pass, their small home shaking with every gust of wind. When dawn finally broke, the village was unrecognizable. What once had been a place of life and warmth now lay in ruins. Roofs were torn off homes, trees lay broken across pathways, and the air was thick with the sound of grief as people emerged to see what little remained of their world. Elara's family had lost everything but the clothes on their backs. Her grandmother's home, the place where so many stories had been shared, where hope had been nurtured with every word, was reduced to a pile of broken wood and ash. Elara wandered through the wreckage, her heart heavy with a despair she had never known. She sifted through the rubble of her grandmother's home, tears streaming down her face as she searched for anything that could be salvaged. A keepsake, a memory, a piece of the life they had lost. But there was nothing. The weight of it all pressed down on her, threatening to crush the fragile hope she had carried for so long. And then she saw it. Nestled amidst the debris, glowing faintly in the soft morning light, was a feather. But it was no ordinary feather. It shimmered with hues of gold, blue, and green, as if it carried the light of the sunrise within it. The edges of the feather seemed to ripple gently, as though touched by an invisible breeze. For a moment, Elara forgot the destruction around her. She stared, her breath caught in her throat, unable to believe what she was seeing. With trembling hands, she reached out and picked up the feather. The moment her fingers brushed against it, a warmth spread through her chest, chasing away the cold that had settled there since the storm. It was not just physical warmth, it was something deeper, something that seemed to reach into the very core of her being. She felt a presence, a silent whisper that spoke not in words but in feelings, as if the feather itself carried a message. Do not give up. This is the beginning, not the end. Tears streamed down Elara's face as she clutched the feather close to her heart. In that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of her life, she felt something she hadn't felt in days: hope. It wasn't the fragile hope of wishing for something better. It was a steady, quiet hope, one that came from deep within her, a spark that refused to be extinguished no matter how fierce the storm. She looked around at the ruins of her village, at the people she loved who were beginning to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. And she realized something. The stories her grandmother had told were not just about magic. They were about resilience. They were about finding strength in the face of despair, about remembering that even in the darkest of times, there is always light to be found, if you have the courage to look for it. With the feather in her hand, Elara made a silent promise to herself. She would not let the storm define her story. She would rebuild, not just her home, but her hope, her dreams, and her life. She would honor the lessons her grandmother had taught her, carrying the stories forward, not as tales of the past, but as guides for the future. And so, with the feather's gentle glow lighting her way, Elara took her first step forward. It was the beginning of a journey she could not yet fully understand, but one she was ready to embrace. Because now she knew the truth. Hope wasn't something you found. It was something you created. With the feather in hand, Elara felt a newfound determination rise within her. The devastation in her village and the loss she had experienced no longer felt like the end of her story, but the beginning of something she couldn't yet understand. She didn't know why the feather had appeared to her, but deep down, she knew it was a sign that she couldn't let despair consume her. There was something more waiting for her beyond the ruins of her home, and the feather, glowing softly in her grasp, seemed to beckon her forward. So, with a heavy yet hopeful heart, Elara made a decision that would change the course of her life. She would leave her village and journey into the vast forest beyond. The stories her grandmother had told spoke of the celestial phoenix, a being that watched over those in need, guiding them to their inner strength. Elara didn't know if the phoenix was real or just a tale, but she felt compelled to seek it. If there was even a chance that the phoenix could help her understand the feather and her own strength, she had to try. The forest was like stepping into another world, a place of awe and mystery that seemed both alive and watching. Towering trees stretched toward the heavens, their canopies so thick they blocked out the sun, leaving the ground dappled in soft, shifting light. Rivers and streams wove through the landscape, their waters singing as they danced over smooth stones. The air smelled of earth and life, but it carried a quiet, almost eerie stillness. It was beautiful, yes, but it was also overwhelming, a place that felt like it had its own heartbeat, its own secrets. Elara walked cautiously, clutching the feather like a lifeline. On her first night in the forest, the darkness closed in around her like a living thing. Without the glow of the feather, she wouldn't have been able to see her own hands. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent her heart racing. Shadows seemed to move at the edge of her vision, and the sound of the wind whispering through the trees felt almost like voices. But through it all, the feather's soft glow remained steady, and Elara held onto it like a promise that she wasn't alone. Yet, The forest wasn't her only challenge. As she journeyed deeper into its heart, she encountered others, people who had been lost, just as she had been. The first was a boy, no older than 10, who stumbled into her path one morning. His face was streaked with tears and dirt, and his clothes were torn from days of wandering. He told her, between broken sobs, that he had lost his family during the storm and had been searching for them ever since. Elara knelt before him, holding out the feather so that its warm light could soothe his trembling form. She told him stories of courage, of how even the smallest light could guide us through the darkest of times. The boy's tears slowed, and though his situation had not changed, he smiled faintly for the first time in days. A few days later, Elara met a woman sitting by a stream, staring blankly into the rushing water. Her face was lined with years of hardship, her spirit so worn that she seemed almost a shadow of herself. The woman spoke of dreams she had once held, dreams of a better life, of love, of purpose. But life's relentless challenges had crushed them, leaving her feeling empty. Elara sat beside her and shared the glow of the feather, telling her that dreams don't die. They only grow quiet, waiting for us to listen to them again. The woman wept, not out of sadness, but because someone had reminded her of the hope she had long forgotten. Further into the forest, Elara encountered an old man who had spent his entire life searching for hope. He had followed every tale, every rumor of magic or miracles, but nothing had ever come of it. He laughed bitterly when Elara spoke of the feather and the phoenix, calling them fairy tales. But when she placed the feather in his hands, the glow spread over his weathered fingers, and something in his eyes softened. He didn't say anything, but he held the feather close to his chest, as though he could feel its warmth reaching parts of him that had been cold for far too long. Each person Elara met reminded her of something her grandmother used to say. Sometimes we are not the ones who need to carry the light. We are the ones who pass it on. With every life she touched, every soul she reignited, Elara felt the feather's glow grow brighter. But more importantly, she felt something change within herself. The fear and uncertainty that had once gripped her began to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence. She wasn't just carrying the light of the feather. She was becoming the light for others. Days turned into weeks as Elara wandered deeper into the forest. The trees grew taller, the air thicker with magic. She began to notice small signs that she was on the right path. Flowers blooming in her wake, the songs of birds that seemed to echo her own heartbeat, the way the streams always seemed to flow in the direction she was walking. Yet, with every step forward, she realized something profound. The feather wasn't leading her to the phoenix. It wasn't guiding her toward some magical being that would solve her problems or grant her wishes. It was leading her back to herself. Elara began to see the truth in her grandmother's stories, the lesson hidden within the tales of the celestial phoenix. The feather wasn't the source of magic. It was a reminder that hope, courage, and resilience were not things you found. They were things you created. They were already within her, within everyone she had met. The feather had simply helped her see it. As she walked, Elara thought back to the boy, the woman, the old man. She thought of the light that had returned to their eyes, the smiles that had broken through their despair. And she realized something else. She had always thought her journey was about finding the phoenix. But maybe, just maybe, her journey was about becoming the phoenix. Not a mythical bird, but a source of light, of hope for others. The forest no longer felt overwhelming or intimidating. The shadows still danced, the wind still whispered, but they felt like part of the journey rather than obstacles to overcome. Elara walked with steady steps, the feather glowing brighter than ever in her hand, but it was no longer her only source of light. The real glow came from within her, from the strength she had discovered, the courage she had embraced, and the hope she had rekindled. And though she didn't yet know where the path would lead, she no longer feared the unknown, because now she understood. The journey itself was the destination, and with every step forward, she was becoming the person she was always meant to be. At last, Elara reached the heart of the forest. The air around her felt different, heavier, and yet exhilaratingly light. It seemed to hum with an energy she couldn't quite describe, as if the forest itself was alive and holding its breath in anticipation of this moment. All around her, the golden light shimmered and danced, spilling through the trees like liquid sunlight. It was beautiful, surreal, and utterly magical. Elara felt a strange warmth bloom in her chest, a mixture of awe and trepidation. This was the place she had been searching for. She could feel it in her bones, and then she saw it. Emerging from the radiant light, as if it had been born from the very fabric of the forest itself, was the celestial phoenix. It wasn't merely a bird, it was a vision of transcendent beauty and overwhelming presence. Its feathers seemed to hold the essence of the universe, glowing with an iridescent brilliance that shifted with every heartbeat. Fiery gold melted into deep sapphire blues, which blended into rich emerald greens, each color shimmering like a living aurora. Its movements were graceful, yet powerful, as though it commanded the air around it with every breath. And its eyes, its deep, ancient eyes, held a wisdom that seemed eternal, as though it had witnessed the rise and fall of countless lifetimes and carried their stories in its gaze. Elara's knees gave way beneath her, and she sank to the ground, overcome by the sheer majesty of the creature before her. Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling freely down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from an indescribable sense of reverence. All the struggles, the pain, the doubts that had weighed her down for so long seemed to dissolve in the presence of the phoenix. She felt as though she were standing on the edge of something vast and unknowable, something that transcended her understanding of the world. With trembling hands, Elara held up the feather, the very feather that had guided her through the darkest moments of her life. Its glow was soft and steady now, as if it recognized the being to which it belonged. Her voice broke as she whispered, This is yours." I don't know why it came to me, but it kept me going. It gave me hope when I thought I had none left. Please, take it." But the phoenix did not move to take the feather. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, regarding her with a gaze that seemed to pierce straight into her soul. The silence that followed was not empty. It was profound, filled with a sense of knowing. Elara felt as though the phoenix could see everything: her journey, her fears, her pain, and the quiet strength she hadn't realized she possessed. It wasn't a look of pity or pride. It was something far deeper: understanding. In that gaze, something shifted within Elara. It was as though a door she hadn't known existed had been unlocked. The phoenix wasn't here to take the feather or to grant her a wish. It wasn't here to magically fix her life or remove the obstacles in her path. No, the phoenix's purpose was something entirely different, something far more profound. It was here to show her the truth. And in that moment, Elara understood. The power to rebuild her life, to overcome her challenges, to find hope in the darkest of times. It had never been in the feather. It had always been within her. The feather was not the source of the magic. It was a reminder of the strength she already carried, the journey she had taken, the lives she had touched, the courage she had found to keep moving forward. All of it had come from her own heart. The feather had simply helped her see it. The realization hit her like a wave, and tears streamed down her face anew. Not tears of sorrow, but of gratitude. Gratitude for the journey, for the lessons learned, and for the understanding that she was capable of far more than she had ever believed. The phoenix let out a soft, melodic cry, a sound so pure and resonant that it seemed to vibrate through the very air around her. It wasn't a cry of sorrow or triumph. It was simply a sound of beauty, a sound that seemed to carry with it the essence of hope itself. The phoenix spread its magnificent wings, and as it did, the golden light that suffused the forest intensified. The entire clearing seemed to glow, the trees, the ground, and the air itself bathed in an ethereal radiance. Then, in a burst of light so brilliant it left Elara momentarily blinded, the phoenix rose into the air. Its wings caught the golden light, scattering it like shards of 1,000 tiny suns. It didn't vanish so much as it became one with the light, dissolving into the shimmering glow that surrounded her. When the light faded, Elara was alone. The forest was quiet again, the golden hues replaced by the soft greens and browns of the natural world. The air still felt different, though, lighter, more alive. And Elara herself felt different. The fear and uncertainty that had once gripped her were gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that burned steady and strong within her chest. She looked down at the feather still clutched in her hands. Its glow had dimmed slightly, but it still radiated a soft, comforting warmth. Elara held it close to her heart, not because she believed it held magic, but because of what it had come to represent. It was a symbol, a reminder of the strength she had always carried within her. The journey had been hers to take, and the hope she had found wasn't something the phoenix had given her. It was something she had discovered within herself. As she rose to her feet, Elara took a deep breath, letting the cool forest air fill her lungs. The path ahead was still unknown, but for the first time, she didn't fear it. She knew there would be challenges, that the world wouldn't suddenly become easy or fair. But she also knew that she had the strength to face whatever lay ahead. She had proven it to herself, step by step, choice by choice. The journey back to her village felt different. The trees no longer loomed ominously. They felt like old friends. The shadows no longer whispered doubts. They seemed to offer quiet encouragement. And as Elara walked, the feather nestled close to her heart. She carried with her the most important lesson of all. Hope isn't something you find in the world around you. It's something you create within yourself. It's in the choices you make, the courage you summon, and the belief that even in the darkest moments, the light within you is enough to guide the way. And with every step forward, Elara carried that light, not just for herself, but for anyone she might meet who needed a reminder of their own strength. Because the true meaning of hope wasn't in the feather, or even in the phoenix. It was in the act of choosing to believe in the possibility of something better, even when the world seemed to say otherwise. And that, Elara realized, was the greatest magic of all. Elara emerged from the forest with the feather still nestled close to her heart. The journey back to her village felt different from the one that had led her into the woods. She had left with doubt and despair weighing heavily on her shoulders, but she returned with a newfound sense of purpose. Every step she took felt deliberate, filled with a quiet confidence that came not from the feather, but from the lessons it had helped her uncover. When she reached the outskirts of her village, the sight before her was one of devastation. The storm that had ravaged her home had left scars everywhere. Homes were still in ruins, fields were barren, and the air was thick with the heaviness of loss. The people of the village moved about like shadows of themselves, their faces etched with despair. They had lost not only their homes, but also their hope. Elara paused for a moment, taking in the scene. Her heart ached for her family, for her neighbors, for the friends she had grown up with. But as she clutched the feather and remembered the light she had found within herself, she realized that she had the power to help rebuild more than just the physical structures of her village. She could help reignite the spark of hope that had been extinguished in the storm's wake. Elara began to share her story. Gathering the villagers in the town square, she spoke of her journey into the heart of the forest, of the challenges she had faced, and of the celestial phoenix. She held up the feather for all to see, its soft glow casting a gentle light that seemed to brighten the faces of those around her. But Elara made it clear, the magic wasn't in the feather itself. It was in the belief it had helped her find. The belief that even in the darkest of times, they all carried the strength to rise again. "The phoenix didn't give me the power to change my life," she said, her voice steady and filled with conviction. "It helped me see that the power was already within me, and it's within all of you too. The storm may have taken our homes, but it didn't take our spirit. We can rebuild, not just with our hands, but with our hearts." Her words touched something deep within the villagers. People who had been too afraid or too disheartened to act began to come together. They cleared rubble, mended roofs, and replanted fields. But more importantly, they started to believe again, not just in the possibility of a brighter future, but in themselves and in one another. Elara didn't just inspire others to rebuild their homes. She inspired them to rebuild their sense of community. She encouraged everyone to share their own stories of resilience and strength, reminding them that they were not alone in their struggles. As each person spoke, the bonds between them grew stronger, weaving a tapestry of hope and connection that became the foundation of the village's recovery. Her family, who had once worried that her dreams of exploring the world were naive, began to see her in a new light. Her parents, humbled and proud, told her how they had underestimated her strength. Her grandmother, who had once been the village's storyteller, smiled with tears in her eyes as she listened to Elara carry forward the torch of hope through her words and actions. The feather became a symbol for the village, not as a magical object, but as a reminder of what they could achieve together. They hung it in the village square, where it glowed softly in the evenings, casting a warm light over the community as they shared meals, stories, and laughter. It wasn't just a beacon of light, it was a beacon of resilience, a reminder that even in the face of great loss, they could rise again. As time passed, the story of the enchanted feathers spread beyond the village. Travelers who passed through heard of Elara's journey and shared the tale with other towns and villages. The story took on a life of its own, evolving with each retelling, but its heart remained the same. A story of courage, resilience, and the power of belief. For Elara, life didn't stop with the restoration of her village. She knew her journey wasn't over. There were still mountains to climb and rivers to cross, still countless stories to discover and share. But she also knew that no matter where her path led, she carried the lessons of the phoenix and the forest within her. She became a storyteller in her own right, traveling to other villages and sharing her experiences. She spoke not just of the enchanted feather, but of the strength that every person holds within them. She listened to the struggles of others, offering comfort and encouragement. And just as the phoenix had shared its light with her, she shared her light with the world. The only years later, when she returned to her village after many adventures, she found that it had become a thriving community, filled with joy and life. The feather still hung in the town square, its glow as steady and warm as ever. But what struck Elara most was the people, how they greeted her with open arms, how their laughter filled the air, how their eyes shone with the same light she had once seen in the phoenix's gaze.